So this is the Galaxy Z Fold7, and I want to make this video super quick because I want to give you guys my thoughts on whether the $2,000 Galaxy Z Fold7 is worth it. So I've had the Galaxy Z Fold7 for about 72 hours now, and I've completely switched over to it from my iPhone. So that means ditching part of the Apple ecosystem and using the new Galaxy Watch 8 Classic as my smartwatch of choice, and the Galaxy Ring, which replaces my Ring-Con Gen 2 smart ring. Now, the transition phase wasn't that hard for me because a lot of the apps that I use on a daily basis is actually on Android. And while there are still some key apps that, are exclusive to iOS, like Flighty, Dazcam, and Craft, just to name a few apps, for the most part, though, I've been able to switch to the Z Fold7 without any issues. And just to give you guys a quick refresher on its specs real quick, the Galaxy Z Fold7 is using the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Elite for Galaxy, which is the same chip that's on the S25 series of phones. So it's the Snapdragon 8 Elite, which is slightly tuned for these Galaxy phones, and then we have, of course, 12 gigs of RAM on this model, although there is a 16 gigabyte version for the Z Fold7 if you opt in for that 1 terabyte of storage. And then when it comes to its battery, we have a 4,400 milliamp hour battery, which does sound small for a foldable. And trust me, I 100% agree with you guys that I think foldables in general should have about 5,000 milliamp hours minimum. But we'll talk about battery life on the Z Fold7 later in the video. All right, so one of the biggest changes here that we're seeing on the Galaxy Z Fold7 compared to the outgoing Z Fold 6 is, of course, how thin and light this new phone is. The Z Fold7 compared to last year's Z Fold is about 26% thinner and about 24 grams lighter, which doesn't sound like a huge difference, but when you actually pick up the phone in person, you really feel and see the difference, and the new one just feels really good in hand. It feels like you're holding the S25 Ultra, but you can actually unfold it to get a bigger screen. Now, if you want to check out for yourselves, I would recommend going to Best Buy or your local carrier store, and they should have this now. And I think you guys will be blown away by how thin and light this new phone is. Now, I know that Honor and Oppo and Vivo's got really thin foldables too, but this coming from Samsung is something I wasn't really expecting, to be honest. Samsung usually likes to play it safe, and they still do technically, but this is a step in the right direction for them in my opinion. And before we talk about the display, I feel like it's worth talking about here. The fingerprint scanner got a little bit of an upgrade as well. Instead of tapping and lifting your fingerprint to register it, you can now just move your finger around and the sensor is going to be able to capture your fingerprint without having you to tap and lift, which is pretty convenient. All right, now in terms of its display, the cover display is now 6.5 inches, which feels like a regular phone now. So over the past few days that I've been using this phone, I've mostly been using the cover display versus the big inner display just because of how normal everything looks on this display. The inner display also got a big upgrade here, which is now an 8-inch display. And the crease and how it feels when you glide your fingers through that crease feels very similar to what I experienced with the Oppo Find N5. I think the Oppo is still a lot less noticeable in both viewing angles and how it feels. But Samsung's definitely closing in on the gap when it comes to that crease. Now, one big thing that they didn't really mention during the keynote is the fact that S Pens no longer work on this fold. They got rid of that specific layer that makes the S Pen work. And I guess there weren't really a lot of people using it. And I believe with them moving that extra layer of digitizer for the pen, they're able to make the Z Fold7 a lot thinner. And for me, I'd rather take the slimmer design over the S Pen because I never really use it, even when I use the Z Fold 5 and Z Fold 6. Now, as far as performance goes, it's pretty fluid, actually. Over the past few days that I've been using this phone, I haven't really experienced any apps crashing or having the system lag or anything like that. Playing games have been really enjoyable too, and if you're a huge gamer, I think the bigger inner display definitely helps making everything you do on the bigger screen feel more immersive. Now, I do think that the phone does get warmer a lot quicker than, let's say, an S25 Ultra or other flagships that are using the same chip, but it's not to a point where it gets extremely hot. I think if you're not really gaming for more than an hour and you're just browsing the web or social or replying to emails, doing, basic everyday tasks, you won't really experience the phone get too hot. It will get warm when you're charging and using the phone, but that also happens with other flagship phones. And then when it comes to its software, the Z Fold7 is one of the first devices from Samsung to ship with One UI 8 out of the box. To be honest with you guys, I haven't really noticed anything different with One UI 8 versus One UI 7. Everything is just as snappy as ever, and the customization that I was able to do with Good Lock and Theme Park seems to work great out of the box. And yeah, I think One UI is top 2 when it comes to Android skins. I think Oxygen OS from OnePlus still takes the cake here, but One UI 8 is actually really good. I don't really have any major complaints here. It has all the latest Google Gemini features, and remember when I said I switched from my iPhone? Yeah, I even have iMessage working on my Z Fold 7. That's why I'm able to ditch my iPhone pretty easily. And then for AirDrop, I'm able to use local send to send files to and from my Mac. Now, I can't really say how I was able to get the iMessage working on here, but all I know is that it is possible. And if you're thinking about switching to, an Android phone, more specifically this Fold 7, I'd say do it. The foldable form factor is so much cooler and things are just more enjoyable in my opinion. Minus watching videos. I think watching videos on the inner display is a little bit weird because there are massive black bars. But besides that, going on social or editing photos in Lightroom on this bigger display is 10 times better than when I was using my iPhone. And then when it comes to battery life, I think the Z Fold 7's battery life is pretty decent. I'm not gonna say it has the worst battery on a flagship phone, but I'm also not gonna say it's amazing. But what I will say is that the phone over the past few days did last about 6 to 7 hours on a single charge, and it's definitely not an all-day phone unless you turn on, battery saving mode at 20%. Now, one thing I wish the Z Fold 7 had though was faster wired charging. I wish it had similar charging speeds as the S25 Ultra at 45 watts, because at 25 watts, charging this thing back up can take about an hour and a half, which doesn't seem a lot, but man, having a fully charged phone in under an hour would have been great. And lastly, the cameras. Now, I was able to shoot a few sample photos when I was out in New York for their event, and while the main camera did get a massive upgrade, which is the same main sensor from the S25 Ultra at 200 megapixels, the ultra-wide and 3x telephoto cameras are kind of meh. So from what I can tell, the main camera at 1x or even 2x looks pretty good when there's enough light, but when it comes to, more low light shots, it starts to get a little bit grainy and you'll see more noise in the shadows, which isn't really that great. The ultra-wide camera does now have autofocus, which is nice to have, but it's still at 12 megapixels, so that means it isn't as detailed as a phone with, 48 or 50 megapixel sensors. And then the 3x zoom, which is my favorite focal length, looks decent enough with enough light, just like the main camera, but at 10 megapixels, it really doesn't look all that great when you start zooming in and cropping in your shot. I think if cameras are, important to you, I would probably stick to an S25 Ultra, which does have better cameras all around, but if you still want a foldable with, better cameras, you can try and pick up the Honor Magic V5, Vivo X Fold 5, or the Oppo Find N5, which I did use for a couple of months, and I think the cameras on this phone looks way better than on the Z Fold 7. But yeah, that's my experience with the Galaxy Z Fold 7 for the past few days. It's definitely a nice upgrade over any previous Z Folds, but with a price tag of $2,000 US, it's a really tough pill to swallow. Now, if you do like Samsung's One UI and their ecosystem, meaning, their watches, their buds, the Ring, the tablets, and laptops, then yes, I get it. Go for the Z Fold 7 and embrace that Samsung ecosystem. But if you want to try other foldables that are more affordable, like the Find N5, Vivo's X Fold 5, or even Honor's Magic V5, then I totally get that too, because $2,000 is a lot of money to spend on a phone. But if you got a phone to trade in and can lower the price tag of the Z Fold 7 by half, I think it's totally worth picking up the Z Fold 7. The software is awesome and doesn't have a ton of bloatware out of the box. The hardware is just as good as its competitors. And while cameras could be a little bit better, the overall package though, I think Samsung really nailed it here. But what about you guys? What do you guys think of the Z Fold 7? Sound off in the comments down below, and yeah, I'll see you all in the next one.